What the f? I subscribed to your channel 11 months and 27 days ago, expecting you to upload another incredibly helpful and amusing music tutorial. But you've just been sitting on that ugly chair studying that pathetic language of your deceased grandfather. It's no wonder you're so unpopular.
Who are you supposed to be?
Who am I? Who am I? Who are you? I am your dumb replacement because you've been slacking. My first video will be a detailed analysis of the 11th century Hindu asset Salvador in Monte. It's gonna be hella lit. That is, unless you have a better idea.
Find me worthy, your grace. I come to you now in a time of great need. The most disgraceful being I have ever laid my pure eyes upon has threatened to take the only thing I have, decent content. Please, I ask of you, show me the way, ancient master of the party rock.
If you truly wish to be blessed with the way of the everyday shuffle, then it shall take you. But you are new, it will not be easy. Now come, my son.
Uploaded on this channel, I was at about 25 subscribers, and now we're nearing 150, so hello, welcome to the channel. In case you didn't know, these are the sort of videos that I usually upload. It was a crazy past year, and it actually had nothing to do with... But we are back, and I'm hoping to go for monthly uploads from now on, just like the good old days. So I'll be making a piece and a tutorial about something related to that piece every month from now on, at least I hope. Now, I made a similar video to this one around 2 years ago, and it was the first one of these tutorial style videos that I made. I've watched it back, and while it's okay, it's been 2 years and I can do a whole lot better. We're keeping the same sort of theme, and we're going to be using another Tristam song, because his birthday is right around the corner, and it's going to be epic. If you don't know who Tristam is, he's an artist who worked previously with Monster Cat, and now he's sort of doing his own sort of thing now. I kind of like it, especially Over the Edge. But we're going to be doing... going back to his golden years when I first found out about him. So yeah, let's get started. We're going to be recreating once again for this video one of my favorites, and one with really good EDM vibes, so I think it's the best fit. The instruments we'll be using are pretty standard: brass, strings, some wind on the high ends, and a good variety of percussion. I just have the essentials here, but if you got a whole set of random percussion sounds, that would be great for filling in some of the little details during the height of the track, but it's not really necessary. I don't have them here. Now, unlike my previous videos where I would show the final product at the end, I'm just going to play it now so that you kind of know what we're working with, and so that maybe I'll be making a bit more sense during the video. Play it. We're going to be keeping everything simple from the beginning. I have no tubular bells or ambient synthesizers, so we're going to be going for a more classical orchestral sound on this one. The layout we got going for the build up here is pretty simple. The high-end instruments like the first violins and the trumpet are going to be doing the melody, and as we go down it's going to get more intricate. The second violins also do the melody, but then they also do this sort of arpeggio thing. It's a great way to add some background to the melody. These violas are sort of doing their own thing. It's mostly just there to add some color and emphasize the impactful parts of the melody, but just still sound good when played alone. I just love the Pirates of the Caribbean vibes I was able to get for this. Just have a listen. The cellos, basses, and French horns are really only doing the chords for this part, but the only thing to note is that they pick up as we near the drop. The winds here are doing this strange sort of counter melody, just some more depth to the arrangement, not exactly necessary during this part of the track. And finally, the percussion, probably the most critical part to defining an upbeat orchestral song. They need to be special when listened to alone, but unnoticeable when everything else is playing. That means keep it simple, but don't be repetitive. Just try to add some melody, even though, yes, I know these are atonal instruments, but just tell me you can't hear at least a little something in this. This build-up really didn't take me that long to make. It's really just a get better with practice type of composition, but put something unique in like 3 of the instruments while the others are playing just normal chords and melody, and you'll basically get this. Alright, so for this part, the drop, I didn't even bother writing a script for it simply because it'd be a little bit... There's a lot of intricacies, right, that I gotta be able to cover, right, and that wouldn't really fit into a script, and also I'm really wanted to get this video out sometime soon, and I didn't feel like writing an entire 10-page essay about how I properly arranged a drop in an orchestral form, right? So I'm just going to walk you through it, and it's going to be great. Brass my ass, more like brass first class, because that's going to be taking the real leading role throughout this drop. I mean, of course you're going to be putting the most powerful instruments at the height of your track. That just makes sense. So you're basically just going to have the French horns and the trombones and anything else operating as the low bass, and then for the high bass bits, you're going to be using a trumpet. For this song, I felt like it was really easy to capture just because it goes low, high, then low, high again. But even if it doesn't take those massive sort of jumps, you can still do what I did here and just sort of blend them in a little bit together. Just make sure they're ordered properly. The only thing different about this is you're going to have to rely on some other instruments to add the depth that massive range difference did not bring in this part. So as you can see here, we got this piccolo or flute, it's probably both, doing this little thing at the top. And we got a couple other things like this xylophone, I believe it is, I think. Throw in some variety from some other different sounding instruments when you can't recreate a sort of melody just relying on one instrument family. Second thing is do not sleep on these lower range instruments, right? Throughout the build-up, they're just doing these simple legato notes, but once the drop hits, they're going to actually get involved in a certain way. You want to add some sort of melody to your lower end instruments, but you still want to keep them subtle. So your higher ranges will be something like John Powell, and then your lower ranges will be something like Hans Zimmer. You may or may not have heard this little melody, but I thought it fit really well in here, so I just decided to recreate it, and I actually love it. Now the final thing that you're going to pay attention to when you're doing the drop is to add variety in between the different parts, right? With EDM, there's a lot of repetition to it, and with an orchestra, that just doesn't really work when you're doing it with something that's so deep and intricate. So what you're going to have here is in between the defining parts and where it would repeat, you're going to add something a little bit different just to keep things fresh. Now since this is the second half of the song, the second drop, there's this little break in between where it goes from drop to a little bit more of a melodic style drop. Now depending on what part of the song you're doing, this one it's the second drop, so after the initial drop there's a sort of continuation of it with a bit more melodic elements. Now you can't just let this transition happen, go from one to another. There needs to be something in between, whether things are getting incredibly more complex like we had before the drop hit, or right here for instance where it completely almost cuts out. Now the melodic part of the drop, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a little bit hard to capture. It took me several attempts to make this sound at least somewhat fitting. Because you're not going to be relying on the massive shifts that you had in the first drop, because things are going to need to stay relatively contained because of the melody, you're going to be adding so many different layers to that in order to make it sound more deep than it actually is. This will most likely include the use of some sort of counter melody. Now the counter melody had a bit of a introduction back here, but it really comes back and sort of develops as we go into the second one, so it's not necessarily something that's demanded, but if you are assuming that your listeners are going to be listening to your track multiple times, it's definitely something interesting to pick out for when they listen to it again. Here is what the melody looks like, and then here is what the counter melody looks like. They're relatively similar in terms of their key structure and the way that they progress, but when it comes down to the fundamentals, they do sound like two completely different things. Now you're going to want to keep your percussion persistent too. You can see that this looks pretty much exactly identical to this one. Big shift from here to here, because that's where the drop is, but then from here to here, aside from that small break in the middle, it's going to be staying the same. And now the final and probably most important step is that if you're going to try and make some sort of EDM or dubstep with an orchestra, you're definitely going to want somewhat of high quality plugins. When you listen to this sort of music, you're supposed to feel a certain sense of power, so if you're using some normie ass free plugins, it's not exactly going to sound perfect. It's definitely something worth trying, but when you're dealing with outdated or inexpensive VSTs, you're just not going to get the same result. I mean, just compare it to the song that I made in the previous How to Make Blank with an Orchestra video. It sounds probably a quarter as impactful as this one does here. Back in that first video I was making Follow Me, which is a whole lot more of a dubstep oriented Tristam track, and even that one didn't sound nearly comparable in terms of its epicness as this one does here. That was partially because it wasn't nearly as complex as this one, but also because I wasn't using as up-to-date plugins. They didn't have a modulation wheel, so they were not nearly as rich as the sounds that came out of this song. And with that, I've covered the track. If you ever wanted to make a song like this, which is probably not very many of you, then hopefully you kind of know what you're looking at doing. And even if you didn't, and if you're just looking here for a standard music tutorial, hey, hopefully you learned something. It's hard to believe it's been 18 months since I've last actually properly made a video. And I'm just glad to be back. I'm glad to be making videos, and it's going to be great. I'll be seeing you next month, but hey, while I got you here, one more thing. If you leave a like on this video, you will receive in the mail a real, genuine Stradivarius violin. It's literally not a joke. All you need to do is leave a like and you'll get this violin. It's pretty epic. This is not a joke. This is not a scam. Just do it. I'll be seeing you in the next video, and always remember, I am convinced that I have no idea how to do